So the hits just keep on coming at Canada's economy, but how serious are they? And how do they impact this election year? Does it hurt the government or help it? Topic one for tonight. Andrew, Chantal, and Bruce all here in studio tonight. Hurt or help, Andrew?
On balance, help. Look, on balance, the oil price decline is a net negative for the economy, but it's negative and positive in different parts of the country. It's negative, obviously, in Alberta, but those voters aren't going anywhere, it seems to me, except Conservative. It's a positive in Ontario. If you're a manufacturer in Ontario, you were not so long ago facing $100 oil, now it's at 49. You had a 95-cent dollar to try to sell in the United States with, now it's an 80-cent dollar. You're looking much, much better. Now, that's not going to suddenly make Ontario a prosperous heartland overnight, but it's certainly a pretty good thing for Ontario. And if Ontario is feeling happier come election time, that's got to be positive for the governing party, and this election is very much going to be decided in Ontario. The one wild card, of course, is the fiscal situation, not because it matters that much to the economy, but because the government has staked so much of its credibility on saying we're going to balance the budget. It's going to be that much harder for them now.
But they're still saying it again today. Chantal, you buy that?
I do buy his answer, vote-wise, and I'm also mindful of the fact that I think the government looks awkward now. They look like they spent for an environment that no longer exists, but I am reminded that when the global economic crisis came about, they started by dismissing it, and then were forced to take it seriously by the fact that the opposition parties were going to take the government down, and in the end were rewarded with a majority for their handling of the said crisis. So I'm not so sure that it's a major factor unless they run their fiscal numbers into the ground by wanting to pretend that nothing is happening and they're going to deliver on all the things they would have liked to deliver on.
You know, I had one strategist say to me the other day that if the opposition parties allow the government to make the issue who's best to handle the economy during a crisis, whether you believe it or not, if that becomes the issue, Bruce, that it's not going to work in their favor, it will work in the government's favor. But if the issue is about how does this affect you? Are you better off, you know, the old are you better off than you were 4 or 5 years ago? How will you look 4 or 5 years from now? Then it gets a little more dicey.
It does get a little bit more dicey, and it really has to do ultimately with confidence. And confidence is a very soft and amorphous kind of piece of public opinion, if I can put it that way. If the question is, would the government have preferred to continue to be running with $100 oil or this? I'm absolutely certain that they would prefer to go back, roll back the clock and have the economic conditions that they had. So in that sense, it's disruptive and unhelpful to them. But what I know about public opinion on these kinds of things is that when the economy looks a little bit shaky, what people want is an air of calm from the government. They don't want the government to look like it's lighting its hair on fire and it's freaking out. When the public is freaking out, they do want government to look like it's taking it very seriously. And the public has become accustomed to taking a little bit more time to react. And markets are reacting very quickly to changes in the interest rates, for example. But public opinion isn't going to react that quickly. It's going to take a little breath.
The other thing I should say in terms of the economy is, just back to that Ontario manufacturer again, not only are you selling into the States with an 80-cent dollar, you're selling into a much stronger U.S. economy, you know, growing stronger by the day, it seems. Plus, you've got Europe now embarked on this ambitious experiment with they're going to pour €1 trillion into the economy. Presumably, that's going to make some for stronger growth in Europe in the months and years to come. I think that things are actually lining up economically not that badly.
The only thing I would say about that, though, is I'm not sure that a lot of voters are going to see the benefits of that in time for October. It will take time to filter through to them. And over that time, what you're seeing are a lot of layoffs in a lot of areas that are not related to oil. The Target layoffs were just a tiny example of the things that are happening. And so the timing of the election may not play to the benefits of this lower dollar and the manufacturing advantage that it gives to Ontario and Quebec.
Interesting. You're still an October person.
Yes,
it's okay. We're not going to get into this spring or October. You are. I want to show you a clip of Stephen Harper, the governor of the Bank of Canada. This was yesterday, and it kind of sums up his position on where we are as it relates to oil prices. Here it is.
The drop in oil prices is unambiguously negative for the Canadian economy. Canada's income from oil exports will be reduced, and investment and employment in the energy sector are already being cut. There will be some offsets, but they are both partial and of uncertain timing.
Have you ever noticed about Bank of Canada governors? with the possible exception of Mark Carney and perhaps one
Long
50 years ago, they all have this kind of rolling thunder sound to them when they're talking. You know, they don't kind of leap off the page. They're very careful.
The last thing they want to do is make too much news. That's right. They want to be in terms of his policy, but he doesn't want any stray slip of the lip to become people reading too much into it or reading just enough into it. So yes, they try to make it as bland as they can.
He sounded in that, and you wanted to jump in on this, Bruce. He sounded very much like the way you've described the situation here right now in terms of the impact things could have.
Well, I think the real question is going to be, he's made the case quite eloquently, I think, that this is bad for the economy, and I know that consumers are seeing the other edge of that coin, that the gas prices have come down and they enjoy that upside right now. I don't think that consumers, with the exception of those who've experienced directly layoffs that have happened, are really seeing those kind of seismic deterioration moments in the economy yet. If we get to a point in June, July, August, where people are saying, no, this oil price thing is really bad for us, they're going to be looking at the government, and they won't just be saying, do we want these steady hands on the tillers? They'll be saying, what is Plan B? What other kinds of policies do we need to consider?
But again, the people who are going to be feeling it most are in Alberta. They are not going to turn on the government, it don't seem to me. They're used to the boom and bust cycle. Alberta has a different approach to these things than perhaps some other parts of the country. They've been through this before. I don't think they're going to be demanding the government come in and save them from the oil price cycle.
No, my proposition was about what people would be feeling in Ontario. If they're feeling that, if they're feeling angst in Ontario at that moment, they will be asking, well, what else have you got as ideas?
There are also hundreds of people from the Atlantic provinces who will be going home because they don't have employment. They were bringing money back. Those provinces are not in great economic shape, and they're not really benefiting from any of this downturn. So it creates a climate of uncertainty, and I think it gives a bit more resonance to, for instance, Thomas Mulcair's argument that while the government was betting on oil, it was letting the rest of the economic fabric deteriorate. You may think what you want of I'm not having an argument on the substance of it. I'm saying the background to have that argument resonate has improved for the opposition. It's not all good for the government.
You know, it was interesting watching Stephen Harper today, because he was trying to move, you know, for years he was doing the energy superpower thing about Canada and that's our future. And today he was doing the, you know, there's a lot more to the Canadian economy than just energy.
Which is in fact true. Now, I agree he's kind of hoisting his own petard rhetorically. But the notion that the sort of opposition talking point that we put all our eggs in oil. No, we didn't. The oil, all of the energy sector, not just oil and gas, but coal and nuclear, not just extraction, but transmission, distribution that works, is 6% or 7% of GDP. The oil and gas sector maybe 3 or 4%. So, you know, 97% of the economy has nothing to do with that. So I do think that meme is overstated. I agree that the grand rhetorical talking point that the government had of the energy superpower is that will be quietly or not so quietly retired.
All right, topic 2, Justin Trudeau. He had his last week, it was Tom Mulcair with his caucus. This week it was Justin Trudeau with his. A couple of days in London, Ontario. The sense now is to try and figure out what did that tell us about the kind of campaign style he may have for 35 days. 2 days in London, 35 on the campaign trail when it happens. Watch this one clip of Justin Trudeau.
On Wednesday, the finance minister said falling oil prices would have no effect on the budget. But the very next day, on Thursday, he said, oh, wait, yes, actually they will, so much so that the budget is now delayed until April. They're making it up as they go along. And let me tell you, I'm a teacher, and their excuses are the political equivalent of the dog ate my homework.
Actually, a dozen years since he's been a teacher, but nevertheless, we don't, you know, the Prime Minister runs around talking about how he's an economist. I guess he can still make that argument that he is. Bruce, what do we take away from Justin Trudeau this?
Well, he's under a great deal of scrutiny right now. He's entering the most important period of scrutiny, I think, of his political life for sure, probably his life as a whole. And so his tour, I think, has been largely successful in terms of drawing crowds and in terms of being free of the kind of gaffes that marked some of his events last year, some of his public comments. I do think that in the 3 months just before the end of the year, in our polling, we saw not an increase in his negatives, but a drop in his positives and an increase in I'm unsure of him, 4 points. And that really, the trigger point was the position that he took on ISIL. And the sense that it gave people that maybe he isn't really as fully experienced as we want him to be for that job. So that's the question that surrounds him everywhere he goes right now, whether he's talking about the economy or whether he's talking about security. And, you know, it's hard for me to judge, looking at little clips, just how he's doing. It does seem, though, that he's still drawing crowds.
I think Justin Trudeau will draw crowds, even if he comes third in the next election, because he is also a celebrity and people want to see him. So we have no way to document whether that translates in the end into solid votes. But I'm not sure that it's not an advantage for him to have lost a bit of ground. When you start a campaign, it is better that people think less of you than that they expect a lot of you. And at this point, diminished expectations, I think, have always been an asset for leaders of the opposition. People assumed that Stephen Harper was a dead man walking, and Paul Martin was the end of the world. Mm-hmm. Look what happened. People thought Jean Chrétien was going to be eaten alive by Kim Campbell. So I'm not sure that that is really dangerous. I think it's an asset to them that they have kept their platform under wraps, and that they are keeping it under wraps because it allows them to adjust it to the realities of the economy. They don't need the publicity of everyday announcements because he draws crowds. So that does not stop the test from happening once the writ is dropped.
It's a very, the style certainly over the last year is very cautious, very careful, very appropriate if you are the front runner, if you are 6 or 8 or 10 points ahead, and which he was 6 months or a year ago, not so much now. And I don't imagine they'll try to do that during the election campaign, but I don't think we're actually seeing an actual walkthrough of how they'll behave in the campaign. They're going to have to, I mean, it's fine for them not to reveal a platform now. No, I mean, we grump about it because we want something to write about, but there's no necessity of it. But certainly come election time, they're going to have to. He's not at his best, shall we say, talking about policy. He's better talking about big, you know, vision things, big picture things. He doesn't do so well on the policy things, and he's obviously, I'm sure he's being drilled daily on the particulars of whatever policies they do eventually release. Well,
and he's going to have to be, because if there's one thing he's got to be ready for, more than anything else, is the debate, which will be all about policy.
And Chantal's absolutely right that he benefits, if he just shows up and doesn't fall over his shoelaces, he's going to get some bounce from that. But in the course of a, whatever, 37, 42-day campaign, he's going to have to show that he's got to resolve these doubts about his substance.
Right.
The last quick word.
Also, is that for Justin Trudeau to win the next election, he needs soft NDP voters to decide to vote Liberal. The only way they're going to do that is if they think they're going to get a Conservative government. So in that sense, slipping a little bit in the polls is also another benefit, even if it feels painful for the Liberals to go through that process.
All right. Got to leave it at that for this week. Good to have you all back. Good you're back from the flu.
Thank you.
No fun, that's for sure, that.